Well, hello there. It is dark outside, as you can see, and I realized I did not record content for tomorrow morning's podcast. But the topic is Christian nationalism. And right before I was putting this book out, I think last year, this devotional book came out called Sometimes You Have to Stir the Pot, 52 Discussions for Christians Living in a Political World. I inserted another essay or chapter or devotional on Christian nationalism, and then I found two others in here that I combined, so I'd still have 52. And while I don't really like to just read to you, this is a good one just to read to you. And so since I'm just reading to you, I'll read to you from my favorite recliner that's actually in the corner of my office. You're probably used to looking at my office that direction. Okay, so this is my office. This is my corner over here where I sit and watch TV. And this is the angle you normally see when I'm recording. You normally see this. There's my desk over here. And there's my end of the room here where I have my bookshelves. There will soon be two more bookshelves flanked there, so I can spread out. And then scanning away, there's my glass top drawing table, drafting table, where with the light underneath it, I work on my cartooning. And that old armoire is supposed to have the bars out of it, and it's supposed to be a place for my office supplies. And this was the last addition to this book. Sometimes you have to stir the pot. And some of the essays that are included in here, I wrote, I think, 2007 up through 2017. But this last one, this book came out last year, so this one was just added last year. Christian nationalism, and I'll be sharing with you from page 107 through 109. Christian nationalism. The United States of America was formed for many reasons, but one of those reasons was that the people wanted a country where they had religious freedom. Those that left England did not want to be forced to live their lives under the control of the king, who told them what religion they were and how to practice their religion and beliefs. In fact, in 1611, King James called for an English version of the Bible to be written that aligned to his Anglican beliefs. This has had lasting effect for over 400 years, as many Christians today still hold King James's authorized Bible to be more correct than others. In reality, it may in fact have many errors, as it was written under a commandment that it be aligned to the king's religious beliefs. The King James Version, which has been revised several times since 1611, is likely to be the least accurate English version of the Bible. There are those who claim today that the United States was created to be a Christian nation. This is not true. The United States was created to be a country where religion and government were separate, and neither was allowed to control the other. The separation of church and state was written into the Constitution. What if the majority of the representatives and senators were another religion? For discussion's sake, I will pick one. Let's say that more than 50% of all elected federal and state government were held by devout Muslim people. What if a majority of the Supreme Court and the president were also Muslim? Would we want all three houses of government to invoke the Muslim religion into the daily lives, laws, and expectations of all U.S. citizens? Would we be happy if all of the public schools and all schools who receive federal funds were required to infuse the Muslim religious practices into the daily school routines? We know the answer to all of these questions. It then becomes a problem when, as a nation, we try to force the Christian religion into our schools and our government. This is against the original intent of the founding fathers, and this is not the country we are. We should be the country that the U.S. Constitution set out to be. We should be a country where all citizens are given the freedom to practice their religion and to practice their beliefs without forcing them on others. Anyone who works in government or carries out the duties of the government must do so in ways that are religiously neutral. The primary foundations of the Christian nationalist group are grounded in false statements. It becomes even more problematic when the leaders of the movement lie, cheat, and take advantage of those they are trying to enlist. Here's something that I saw on Facebook, and this was in Clergy Coaching Network on April 19th, 2024, and I did get permission to use this. Christian nationalism is just plain old nationalism in which Jesus is trolled out as a mascot to endorse something that bears absolutely no resemblance to the Sermon on the Mount or apostolic Christianity. After reading this, I began to realize that this was a developing issue of disagreement within the church at large. When I see politicians who create a big lie, repeat it over and over and over again, and gather a following who believes the lie, this is a big red flag. When the leaders of such a movement are under indictment for multiple crimes, caught in a theater performing sexual acts, cussing out reporters for asking them questions, and knowingly repeating political lies while holding Bibles and shouting that Christianity is under attack, I recognize the irony and the hypocrisy. The Christian nationalist group is not led by actual Christians. It is a creation of a political faction that has discovered a quick way to gather followers and supporters. They are using Jesus as clickbait. In the past, I used to wonder how the Antichrist would be able to fool so many people in the end times. I didn't think it would actually be possible. What I have witnessed in the past 10 years lays out the playbook and path for an antichrist and demonstrated the speed at which Christians will give up ethics in order to embrace anyone who wraps himself in a flag and holds a Bible in the air. We must no longer be children tossed to and fro and blown about by every wind of doctrine, by people's trickery, by their craftiness, deceitful scheming. But speaking the truth in love, we must grow up in every way into Him who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and knit together by every ligament with which it is equipped, as each part is working properly, promotes the body's growth in building itself up in love. Now, while I'm quoting a scripture here that talks about what we have to do to share the message of God and the love of God and the truth of God to all people. I didn't do that here to say, okay, that's what we've got to do and we've got to go out and get all these people. No, what I'm pointing this out is the people that are going about this Christian nationalist movement are doing all of the things that's exactly opposite of that which we've been called to do. Not only are we called to live our lives honorably and honestly, aligning the calling God has on our lives, we must hold our leaders accountable to honor and honesty. We must be careful to not get manipulated into believing that which is not true. People, we just have to be smarter. When someone's lying to you, You can't stick your head in the sand and just pretend and says, "Oh, I'm going to overlook this law because they're going to do this for me." And then it turns out, yeah, they don't actually do what you said. The way this book is organized, there's always discussion questions. So here are the questions that I included for chapter 31, which chapter 31 was week 31 of the year, the devotion on Christian nationalism. Question 1. How does being a Christian influence your politics? Question 2. What does freedom of religion mean? Question 3. What does separation of church and state mean? Question 4. Should the government be religiously neutral? Question 5. Should the church be politically neutral? Question 6. What misconceptions do some people hold in response to these types of questions? On the surface, when you hear the term Christian nationalism, sounds like a good thing. If you are a member of a Christian faith, and I am, then there are Christian values that I value. Nationalism, as a child who went to school in the 60s and 70s, we were taught to be patriotic. So that doesn't seem like a bad thing. Christian, good thing. Being patriotic. Nationalism seems like a good thing. You put those two things together. On the surface and at its root, it seems like it would be a good thing. But you have to carefully analyze what these baboons are actually doing. They're violating the very beginnings of our country that was formed because they came from a place where the king told them what the religion had to be and what church they had to go to and what they had to believe. And they came to this country for religious freedom so they could practice their own religion, which was variations of the same Christianity they came from. But they wanted to do that without the government interfering. And this whole Christian nationalist movement is the government interfering with the people's right to worship God. Not everyone in our country practices Christian religion. And even if they did, people came and started this country to avoid another Christian religion that's telling them how they have to believe and what they have to do. And it's not hard to understand why it's a bad thing when you go through the scenario that I put in the book. I just imagine that you're a Christian and the president is of a different religion. The Supreme Court is a majority of a different religion. The senators, the House of Representatives are of a different religion. And so now they're going to tell you that you can't be Christian anymore because you have to do their religion. And you'll say, wait, you can't do that. We have freedom of religion. But the Christian nationalists are trying to do the same exact thing to people who are not following the Christian religion. So in order for Christian nationalism to work, you really have to throw out the Constitution. And if you throw out the Constitution, then you have killed the idea of the United States of America, and we are no longer the United States of America that we were created to be. Okay, those are my thoughts. I tend to agree with myself. Christian nationalism is bad, and on the surface, it might look like, oh, that sounds like a good thing. But when you see what the people that are running with this Christian nationalist agenda, the things that they're doing are actually unchristian. All right. Thank you for watching. Y'all have a good week.